Well, as I was saying, there are not enough words for me to thank you for last Sunday's birthday surprise. I was and am absolutely blown away. If you want to see it, Adam has posted a video of it on the Ordinary Life Facebook page. Where are you, Adam? Right back there. And we're working to get that link through to Facebook. Or you can hear it. The audio version is on the website. You know, a person could get an inflated ego from that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you for that. I understand they have a guest preacher in Big Church. Okay, so
pretty good too.
I don't know. Has anybody heard him? Is he pretty good?
Pretty good. He'll be better in 11.
I bet he's going to be tired this afternoon. I bet. Huh? Yeah, I heard about a preacher one time who dreamed he was preaching and woke up and he was. I told the choir if they were attending the third service not to pay attention in the first. That way it'd sound fresh. That's what I did. So if you're here for the first time, or even if you're not, you just need reminding, this gathering is about deepening our awareness and involvement of and in sacred mystery, growing in an understanding of our true identity, and developing skills and courage to practice a religion of kindness, generosity, and compassion outside of here. And if this is your first time, welcome. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on the spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Somebody said to me last Sunday, well, you won't have to prepare a talk for this week. It doesn't quite work that way. Actually, I began writing part of what you were going to hear well before Harvey came. We didn't anticipate Harvey. And as you know, the week that Harvey came, we did not meet at all here. As a matter of fact, later that day, I saw 3 men in a canoe go down our street. And fortunately, unlike many people, you'll hear more about this later, we did not have water damage, but we were landlocked for 4 days. And at the fourth day in the morning, Sherry came up to my man cave, as she calls it, and said, "Is this what it's like to be in prison?" And I said, "I don't think so." Anyway, the next Sunday we had only one service, and Tommy wanted every clergy involved, every clergy on the staff here involved in that service. And so I mentioned what Sherry had said in the sacristy, and Matt Russell said, "No, it's not like what it's to be in prison. It's what it's like being locked up with you for 4 days." So we kind of got out of sync because of Harvey, and then the Sunday after that, I wanted to speak to some understanding of my understanding of why so-called bad things happen, and how we find God in the midst of all of this. And because of the hurricane that hit Florida soon after Harvey, the attention of the media went there. So I want to try to put us back in the context of where people in this geographical area are. I think from a psychological and logistical, but psychological, spiritual point of view, we're going to be dealing with the consequences of Harvey in this area for a long time. One of the things is the collective grief. So many. When somebody tells you they lost everything they had, they're talking about for those of us in pre-digital days, they're talking about baby albums, wedding albums, keepsakes from family. I talked to one woman who house they lost everything, and all the furniture in her house had been made by her grandfather. I mean, just things like that. The whole grief that will settle upon us. And also, I think we're, in the second place, going to be dealing with, as New Orleans did, long-term consequences of displacement. People who cannot go back to where they did live, and all of that. This picture you see on the screen is a Memorial Drive just east of the intersection with Wall Drive, looking down into downtown. We had, as you know now, 50 inches of rain. Unprecedented flooding. This is what we know so far. 66 people were killed because of the flooding of Harvey. 30,000 people were displaced. 100,000 homes were devastated, and only 10% of those were insured for flooding. I have heard that over 500,000 cars were lost in this flood, and estimates are that the damages are something in the neighborhood of $200 billion. 17,000 people had to be rescued. And I have an iPad that has an app on it that lets me watch TV on my iPad. And I sat during much of those 4 days, as most of you did, glued to the screen to watch what was happening. And it was really, really something. So, weeks ahead of time, and getting ready to speak here, I had been given by someone a prayer by Saint Teresa of Avila. Now, we who are interested in mystics and mysticism call this one Big Teresa, because Little Teresa is Teresa Celeste. And so there are two Teresas who became doctors of the church. And Teresa of Avila, actually Sherry and I visited in her very place in Avila. And someone had handed me a prayer, and speaking of an example of divine entanglement, this is not the prayer, but Teresa's the one who said, how can you enter a room that you are already in? That's an example of non-duality. All right? How can you enter a room that you are already in? At any rate, here's the prayer. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. So I began to work on that talk, and Harvey came, and then Irma came. And then there was an earthquake in Mexico, and a hurricane in Mexico, and wildfires on the West Coast, and flooding in India, and in the Middle East. And in addition to those natural disasters, there's what is going on in Myanmar between the Buddhists and the Muslims. Tragic, tragic situation. There's the North Korea sword rattling and the chaotic political scene in this country, and it just goes on. I have heard Tommy Williams, and my respect and appreciation for Tommy just continues to increase. I've heard Tommy say that one of the blessings about being a church that has a lectionary-based liturgical worship ritual is that every week the people who plan for the worship service, that is the ones who plan the music, plan what the choir will sing, write the prayers, preach the sermon, are guided by the lectionary texts that are appointed for that Sunday. That's a blessing. I have also heard him say that one of the curses of being a lectionary-based congregation is that you have these texts that you have to deal with every Sunday. And I thought sometimes, in light of what's going on out there, what sense does that make? Because my commitment is that I want to offer teachings that are sensible and relevant and meaningful. How can using a document for guidance that contains teachings that can be traced, at least in some cases I'm convinced, as early as the first part of the first century, meet those criteria? So I want this talk in part at least to answer that question. Why focus on the teachings of Jesus, say, rather than Buddha or Confucius or Lao Tzu? And further, given this, what might it mean if we look at Jesus, if we don't see Jesus as an evacuation plan? You know, you believe in Jesus and whoop, you're gone at the end of life or safe. What might it mean to call oneself Christian without that label being divisive? And further, what does any of that have to do with learning how to keep our heads above water in these inundating times? Or even better, how do we learn to do what Richard Rohr calls breathing underwater? Now, this is not a modest agenda for this time, but I'm going to try. And some of you are going to stand up and cheer. Please don't. I'm taking this particular tack today and structuring the outline of this particular talk today because before long, we're going to come to the end of going through the Gospel of Thomas. There are 114 sayings in the Gospel of Thomas, and we are up to 108. So we've been doing this for a while. So I want to read you the one that we're up to today, because we're going to come back to it several times. Whoever drinks what flows from my mouth will come to be as I am, and I also will come to be as they are, so that what is hidden may be made manifest. I hope by the time this class is over today, this teaching is crystal clear. What flows from my mouth, if you drink it, you will become as I am. Now, I want to say two brief things about this teaching. First of all, Jesus did not say this. That is to say, this saying meets none of the criteria that respected biblical Jesus historical scholars use for determining what Jesus more likely said than what he did not. This is a saying that the followers of Jesus put in Jesus' mouth. Now remember, he wrote nothing. His followers wrote things down. As I like to put it, two ways. Jesus told parables. His followers told parables about Jesus. Jesus wrote pieces of music that his followers performed differently for different audiences, depending on their goal, and depending on the instrument that they used, their own instrumentality, their own uniqueness. That's why the four Gospels that we have in the Christian collection are so different from each other. And the Gospels that we have that are not in the Christian canon are really quite different from what we have. So, second, though the Gospel of Thomas is not a narrative of Jesus' life, and though it appears to have at times very little internal cohesiveness, it's clear that the community that put these sayings together is now beginning to anticipate that this document is coming to an end. Now, we don't know a lot about the Thomas community, but scholars have, because of archaeological and linguistic advances, learned much about what we call the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers and why they went away from metropolitan areas so that they could avoid persecution, so that they could avoid being contaminated or co-opted by the political system around them, what they saw happening to their Jewish faith around them. And though these sayings in the Gospel of Thomas many of them are not even purported to be sayings of Jesus. They do give us insight into the lives and the beliefs of Jesus' followers up until the time of Constantine. And this particular saying, it is saying to those who heard it, pay attention. Pay attention to the teachings that have gone on before this, because if you take them into yourself, they will transform you in two ways, which we will get to before we're done. If you're nurtured by these teachings, you will experience the peace, the love, and joy that mark not only Jesus, but that mark those people who became transformed because of their involvement with him. Now, I know that there are those of you who want something, as you put it, practical from these talks, something that you can take away from here. This is it. How do peace, love, and joy show up in your life? How do they show up in the immediacy of the concrete relationship that you have with yourself and with the other people in your life? How do you measure that? How are you doing in that department? If you were to see a spiritual director, one of the first things she or he would ask you is, how are you doing with peace, love, and joy? How's it going in your life? Are you at peace? Are you in love? Are you happy? Are you joyful? My experience is that the internal dialogue most people have with themselves, not you, of course, but most of the internal dialogue most people have, it consists of sentences that are fearful or judgmental. I mean, if you're a 5, 6, or 7 on the Enneagram, we are experts at scaring ourselves. And we have to be aware of that and break into that habit to catch ourselves doing that and to learn to stop it. Now, I was vaccinated with Christianity. What is a vaccination for? You get vaccinated for smallpox so you won't catch it. Right? You get vaccinated for mumps and measles and all that so you won't get it. I was vaccinated with Christianity when I was a little kid, and I didn't get it. I got church. I got to go to church a lot. And I am so grateful for that. I am so grateful for the things that I have learned in the religious institutions that I have been part of since almost the day of my birth until now. I have benefited so much. And ironically, the very things I learned in those religious institutions has enabled me to turn around and be critical of those religious institutions. To love and to be critical at the same time. I'm confident that there's just a whole lot that goes on in the name of Christianity and churches that Jesus would not recognize. Not recognize. I was going through a file that I have at my house, and less than 2 years ago, a Baptist, of course it has to be Baptist, anything dumb that shows up on television having to do with religion, you can bet that it's either going to be Baptist or Texas. That's the way it seems to me. There was a Baptist church in Troy, New York, that auctioned off as a way to build church attendance AK-47.
Whoa.
I bet it got a crowd. By the way, attending church is not the same as being Christian. Right? There's an old quip about, going into a church no more makes you a Christian than going into a garage makes you a car. So the way Christianity has been taught is that it is an evacuation plan. If you belong to our group, you're safe. If you believe the right things, you are safe. For me, and you will have to decide for yourself what it means for you, believing in Jesus means seeking to place, as he did, my trust in the relationship with the sacred that he had. That make sense? That's what it means to believe in Jesus. To seek to have that kind of relationship with sacred mystery that he had. An intimate one, a warm one, a safe one. Nothing to be afraid of. The community that created the Gospel of Thomas, as well as other desert fathers and mothers, who wanted to protect themselves from a world gone wrong, and they wanted to do what they could to contribute to peace, love, and joy, so that their lifestyles would affect the world. Those people are not people we are likely to emulate. None of us is going off to join a monastery somewhere. The woman we began with today, St. Teresa, was a nun in Avila, Spain, and she lived, for the most part, a cloistered life. Julian of Norwich, who is the one that gave us the word one with God, and she is the one who we're fond of quoting as saying, all shall be well. She was an anchorite. Now, I don't know if you know what that word means, but an anchorite is someone who's anchored to a particular geographical place, and after her vision, she asked at the cathedral in Norwich that they build her a cell where she lived for the rest of her life. She's anchored to that place. I don't see anybody here about to do that. Thomas Merton was a hermit. Got out very infrequently. Shane Claiborne, whom some of us went to see at a Richard Rohr conference. He's a very interesting character. He's funny, he's brilliant, he's written a modern prayer book. He's conversant in Greek and Hebrew. When the Iraq War broke out, he went to Iraq to pray with the Iraqis, to be with the Iraqis, and to say to the people of Iraq, we're not all like this. I'll show you somebody else. Guess who this is? This will blow you away.
That's Ilya Della. You're Delia. Yeah. Oh, that's oh my God. Yep. It does blow you away.
You can almost see the older Mother Teresa in this young, beautiful woman. Right? She lived with the poor in Calcutta. Most of us are not going to do that. And I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty because we're not. I'm just saying there are people in the world who hear the message of Jesus, the call of Jesus, and they make these radical leaps into the world in ways that give embodiment to kindness and joy and compassion and justice. Why Jesus? Now, the answers are many. For one thing, I want to serve as a corrective force for anyone, and there have been a multitude, too numerous to count, who've been hurt or damaged by some religious energy masquerading as Christianity. But I read recently something by W.H. Auden, the poet, he's the guy who came up with the phrase, the age of anxiety. And he wrote that wonderful poem called For the Time Being. That W.H. Auden. He said, when asked why he believes in Jesus, W.H. Auden said, I believe because he is in every respect the opposite of what he would be if I could have made him in my own image. So thus, Auden said, if I'm asked why Jesus and not Socrates or Buddha or Confucius or Muhammad, all I can say is that none of the others arose all sides of my being to cry, crucify him. So I wanted to see how close I could get to and to understanding this Jesus fellow as a companion for the living of my life, and not just as some religious trickster who can get me off the hook somehow. But there is more to it than that, and you've heard this before. I'll be brief with this, but it's just so important to say. Sometime in the 60s, which was a decade sent its own unique shockwaves through this country, the whole music of our popular culture began to change in the 60s. You remember that?
Yeah.
We went from singing very moving songs like "I Want to Get You on a Slow Boat to China," "Shrimp Boats Are Coming." Some of you remember these. "How much is that doggy in the window?" To singing "Bridge Over Troubled Water" and "The Sounds of Silence." And sometime during that particular period, I was found by a quote in the writings of Carl Jung that set the trajectory for my professional and personal life. And if you pay attention to the announcement slides, or if you show up here consistently for 6 months, you will hear this or have heard this particular quote. Among all of my patients in the second half of life, that is to say over 35, there's not been a one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. At that time in my life, I needed external permission, I think, to put together what I wanted to do, which is to forge some union between psychology and spirituality. And since then, from then to now, I've come to see there's no division of those, that psychology and spirituality are exactly the same thing. If you find the true self, you have found God. God is not out there. I think that it's really important to have a correct understanding of religion, because misunderstood religions are abusive, they're dangerous, they're damaging, they're hurting our world right now. And I think in many ways I must be the most fortunate person on the planet to have been able to pursue this passion in the way that I have. It's allowed me to sit with people during the most challenging, growth-producing times of their lives. It's allowed me to hole up in my cave and read the things that energize me. It's just been, and to stand here, it's just been a privilege and an honor. And it's allowed me to find teachers like Richard Orr and introduce them to you, and to introduce to you the teachers that Orr has introduced to me, sometimes in person like with Ilya Delio, or not in person like with Jim Finley and Open Doors that he has. Robert Johnson, one of my Jungian teachers, says that if you use the tool of discernment, you can look back over your life and you can see the golden threads that have woven the tapestry that have led you from there to here. And I certainly see that's true for me. When I first found that Jung quote, what I saw my path to be was that of a teacher. Look, here I am. It didn't turn out quite like I thought it would. It turned out better. I got fired from the teaching position I thought would be my career, and I ended up here. There's another quote from Jung that I don't think I shared with you. It's just as good, because he was asked something about the future of Christianity, and Jung said, "This is not to say that Christianity is finished. I am, on the contrary, convinced that it is not Christianity, but our conception and interpretation of it that has become antiquated in the face of the present world situation. The Christian symbol is a living thing that carries in itself the seeds of further development. It can go on developing. It only depends on us. Whether we make up our minds to meditate again and more thoroughly on the Christian premise. Carl Jung wrote that in The Undiscovered Self in 1958. Now, it would be interesting to know what Jung would say now, especially what he would say in the light of so-called evangelical Christianity and how it's been co-opted by the political right in this country, making Christianity kind of merge and become an amalgam of American values, which is another reason I wanted to contribute both to the religious and spiritual literacy. Jesus was not a Christian. Okay? And more importantly, Jesus was not an American. However, honest to God, I was brought up to believe he was a Southern Baptist. Okay. Here, that's our context. So I began to realize several years ago that I personally wanted to move beyond something of an academic understanding of all of this, by what you meant by second half of life spirituality. And the spiritual teachers I've come to know, learn from, respect, almost all refer to this territory that is beckoning as non-dual mind, or mystical understanding of religion and spirituality. Not just an understanding of, but an experience with this spirituality, experience of it, and experience in it. So after giving intellectual attention to the Jesus of history, who he was, what he had to say, I was led by my reading and study and learning about from the Gospel of Thomas into my own involvement with the teachings in the Gospel of Thomas. And I've been doing the Gospel of Thomas probably 3, 4, 5 years before I started teaching it. And then the Gospel of Thomas has been the guide for these talks. It's always been comforting for me to have a map to follow in constructing these talks. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to talk about next week. At any rate, here we are. I really want you to get this teaching. This is in the canonical Gospels in a variety of ways. It's particularly in the Gospel of John in maybe 4 or 5 different ways. It's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Particularly if you see it reminiscent of the Eucharistic liturgy. It's something you take into yourself and you're transformed by what you take in. These statements of the early followers about Jesus and their transformed lives because of him are saying that there is something hidden in us. There is something within us. There's something potential within us, our true selves, that becomes manifest through unification with the truth. Got that? There's something in us that shows itself when we open ourselves to being unified with the truth. Now, Richard Rohr says there are 2 ways you can get into this non-dual space. You can get there through a profound spiritual practice, which each of you now has. Or you can get there through enormous suffering. You know, right before Harvey hit, we were seeing some really ugly sides of our collective unconscious. There has been a creeping hatred and fear moving through our country and over the world. We're not exclusive to it, but we have had some nasty stuff. And my fear has been that that nasty stuff was becoming normal. There are some prophetic voices that say things like hate is not good. It's not okay to say everything you think, like your mouth is a gum machine. We have a thought and it just rolls out. The power of what I consider the manifestation of sacred mysteries, unconditional love, was undeniably evident during the rescue efforts during and after Harvey. People of diverse races and backgrounds risked their lives to save, comfort, and shelter others. No one who voluntarily had a big vehicle or a boat that could get through deep water asked the race or religion of the people they rescued. Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, people of every social background endangered their lives without a moment's hesitation to rescue those who needed to be saved. I've asked a lot of people since Harvey, and you have too, I'm sure. I'm not one of those who can say we lost everything, but I have talked to people who have lost everything. And as I said, I think we've got a massive cloud of grief that's going to descend on us. I think we have these huge issues of relocation as families and communities can't go back to where they were. And I'm just wondering, do we as a country have to be hit in the gut with a catastrophic disaster like this for unconditional love to surpass hate? We've been hit before, and then we unconsciously drift back into territory we call normal. And if the normal is to go back to something like Charlottesville, I hope we don't make it. Harvey reveals story after story of all sorts of lines and divisions being crossed in efforts to rescue people. Charlottesville exposed the infectious power of the disease of white supremacy. Jesus and his movement stood against anything that stood for fear, hate, and violence. I love the way that Matt Russell, in spite of the fact that he gives me such a hard time. Matt is my boss here, you know. He hates me to remind people of that. I love the way Matt ends all of his emails. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Truth is stronger than lies. Now, I'm sure you do this, so I know I'm preaching to the choir. However, if we say we believe this, we need to show we believe this by how we live our lives. Out there. How we speak. What we say. Whether we sow seeds of division or kindness. Whether we sow seeds of putting people down or all working on the same level of equality. This teaching in Thomas that we're looking at today is saying that when we drink in, what we drink in from the Master, in this case Jesus, when we do that, we become one with the Master. And that union itself becomes a form of revelation. This drinking in of wisdom is done by means of investigation and penetrating the intricacies of the parables, the proverbs, the teaching. So that this teaching goes back to the very first one that we had in the Gospel of Thomas. And I'm going to go back and read that to you so that you can see this teaching in light of that one. The Gospel of Thomas begins this way. These are the hidden sayings that the living Jesus spoke and that Didymus Thomas wrote down. And he said, whoever finds the correct interpretation of these things will never die. Jesus said the seeker should not stop until, forgive him for being sexist, he didn't know better. The seeker should not stop until he finds. When he does find, he will be disturbed, and after having been disturbed, he will be astonished, and then he will rule over everything. The goal of being nurtured by the teachings of Jesus is not just that we know stuff, as important as that is. It's not about becoming good people, although I think we should be good. It is so, in the words of this teaching, that what is hidden in here can be manifest. It's not about becoming something, not about believing something. It's about allowing the truth to be shown. As each of us awakens to our own deepest aliveness and lives out of it, we too, no less than Jesus, show forth what God is like in human form. Now, folks, this is very biblical. It is very Jewish. You can see it in the Jewish scriptures, where Jacob and his brother Esau finally lock beard to beard. And Jacob says to his brothers, I see your face, and you look like God to me. Jesus said that. I and the Father are one, and so are you. And if you see the you that I see in you, you can manifest that whole. This is very non-dual. Not only is the lower transformed into the higher, but simultaneously the higher is totally assimilated into the lower. I'll say that one more time. But this is non-dual. You can't put non-dual stuff in language, but not only is the lower transformed into the higher, but at the same time, the higher is assimilated into the lower. What is revealed is our deepest and most authentic personhood. The mystic is the person who can say with Paul, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Now, if I am clear that the Jesus of history I am clear that the Jesus of history was a troublemaker. He was trying to create a new socio-political revolution. That's true. But that is not all he was trying to do. He was attempting to birth a fully divine human race, a race of beings as radically alive and aware as he was. Jesus was not among us to be worshipped, but to be imitated. He did not want us to depend on him, but to learn from him. His purpose was not to do something for us, but to help us understand what we can, indeed must, do for ourselves and for each other. He did not want our praise, he wanted our practice. You know, there's a saying in Buddhism that captures this. In Buddhism, the saying is, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Have you heard that before? What this means is that if your spirituality is somehow alienated from you, if you put it in a person, or a church, or a doctrine, or a political party, or status, or whatever, kill it. If your spiritual identity is alienated from you, we work to get it back together, is what this teaching is saying. We absorb the teachings so that not only can we assimilate them, but that we can be one with that which we assimilate. We got a watershed opportunity. When I was in grammar school, and this is probably a gross misunderstanding, oversimplification, I was taught that the Continental Divide was called a Continental Divide because if a raindrop hit the Continental Divide and went 1 inch to the east, it would end up in the Atlantic Ocean. And at 1 inch to the west, it would end up in the Pacific Ocean. In 1845, James Russell Lowell wrote a poem that was published in the Boston Courier, now no longer in print. And he was protesting America's war with Mexico at that time. And that poem was set to music, and it's in most hymnals, Protestant hymnals now. Maybe Catholic hymnals too, I'm not sure. But the poem is the Watershed Divide poem, in a way. Russell Lowell says, once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide. In the strife with truth of truth with falsehood for the good or evil side. Some great cause, some great decision, offering each the bloom or blight, and the choice goes by forever, twixt the darkness and that light. Then to side with truth is noble, when we share her wretched crust, ere her cause bring fame and profit, and its prosperous be just. Then it is the brave man chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they had denied. By the light of burning martyrs, Christ, thy leading feet we track, toiling up new Calvaries ever, with a cross that turns not back. New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward, who would keep abreast of truth. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet the truth alone is strong. Though her portion be the scaffold, and the strong be up on the throne be wrong, yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Whoever drinks from what flows from my mouth will come to be as I am, and I also will come to be as they are, so that what is hidden can be made known. Folks, let's drink deeply. No matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this: you carry precious cargoes, so watch your step. And I'll see you here next week. Thank you.